Hey, kids, rock and roll, rock on. Yeah. Yeah, David Essex, 1970s, thereabout. And, the world today would be much better if the music that came out of the 1960s and 70s was the music coming out of today. But it's not. The music coming out of today is something that, to me, has taken on a completely different flavor. And the way that we deal with our media is one of those things that I want to make the topic of conversation today, because I really think that participatory media is the way of the future. And this is the new way where we take everything we knew and weigh it. And so the reason I weigh in favor of participatory media is because it brings people coming back for more. And if you're participating in your media actively by talking with the host, chatting in a chat room with other people who are participating in the show, and exchanging ideas with a variety of people, it opens you up to the consideration of many more ways of doing things than you might come up with from your individual perspective. Now, when we deal from human scale, the human always has to be the focus. And as an individual group of one, the human that you are is the focus of what your lifestyle becomes. And so if you want to take in media from, say, the lamestream media, and you want to sit there and watch CNN or Fox News or something like that, then the mindset that you're in fits at the frequency of presentation that they're presenting to you, and you tend to believe whatever they tell you because you're emotionally prepared to believe that that's the way it is. And the conditioning that we've undergone in America is quite different from the conditioning that people get everywhere else in the world. And so we've got a media that tends to keep us in the dark about important things and keep us indoctrinated with a belief system that we were taught in the public schools that really cannot be questioned unless you go far enough through the public school system to earn the privilege of questioning it, which by the time you get there, you have a vested interest in that school system, and you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. But unfortunately, that hand that feeds us, on the one hand, is giving, and on the other hand, is taking away. So Dr. Lenny was a hermit for a major part of the last 10 years. But back last year around, I think it was December 2017, when I took my blog off of WordPress and moved it to Steemit because I was tired of being shadow banned on WordPress. And I figured Steemit seemed like a new way of earning cryptocurrency. And I wasn't quite sure what cryptocurrency would do for me, but I wasn't too fond of the way that regular currency was dealing with me. And I had dropped out of the monetary system back in 2012, and I have gone months at a time without ever needing to spend a dollar because of the exchanges that I've worked with other individuals who are happy to gift me materials rather than pay me dollars so that I can get just about everything I need by individual barter. This is not something that works for everybody because it's hard for most Americans to conceptualize an American who does not go to the grocery store and shop for their own food. But when you live on 37 acres and the food is kept up in supply in the kitchen area, there's no reason to actually leave to do the shopping. It's somebody else's responsibility. And my responsibilities on the land are pretty well spelled out. Now, I'm not on the land right now. In fact, I haven't been on the land since last Friday. Today is Thursday, so this is day 6 of my experiential adventure out into the world. And I went from being a hermit with one other human on the land to being a hermit with 2 other humans on the land. So I've doubled the capacity I have for the interaction of other people. I tried to get the other 2 people on this land to watch the Quite Frankly programming with me, but they're just not ready to buy that sort of style of entertainment. What is Quite Frankly? Well, quite frankly, if you haven't experienced Quite Frankly is a trip. And it's quite entertaining for those who are quite annoyed with everything else because Frank will question everything and he thinks it's quite funny. So in the chat room right now, I have Chicken Patty, who I met in the Quite Frankly chat room last week. And we struck up a little friendship because the Quite Frankly chat room is a very, very open place for putting out ideas and seeing who bites and running with the ideas in such a way that there can be 20 or 30 different conversations going in the chat room, totally unrelated to what's going on the air. And it is an entertaining experience to make comments to the host, Frank, of Quite Frankly, his guests, who can be anybody. And a lot of his guests have included people I know because I got drawn to the show at first because I wasn't interested in the media. I was taking the alt media and trying to find a way of interfacing my idea of truth with their idea of truth. And the whole idea of truth is a relative thing. You believe what you're going to believe, and it becomes your truth until it can't be true, and then it better not be your truth anymore. Because if you know that something's false and you believe it is true, you're just lying to yourself. Anyway, Chicken Patty, if you're here right now and can hear me, why don't you mic in and say hello? It takes popping the mic icon at the bottom of the screen, at least on the screen that I'm working on. If not, type in the chat room. Live. Because after all, we invited you here to talk. We might as well get you here talking. So there should be a microphone icon, there's a headphone icon, and there's a pop out of the radio chat. And if you tip the microphone icon, that'll get you onto the airwaves. And in fact, Discord is one of those things where we're broadcasting through a Discord channel, but the radio station is on radio.co. And if you want to run a radio station, radio.co provides a lot of support for radio and podcasts. So it's definitely something to check out if you can. I can unmute her mic. Oh, okay. Let me go in and unmute her mic then. That'll work. Now I got to figure out how I need to work this, but I'm pretty sure that I know which buttons to hit because I know where the server settings are. The members are. And so all I have to do is get to the right member and help. I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in the chat room and I'm going to supply somebody with a role who can help me negotiate this chat room right now because I'm seeing a way that I can ban her, but I am not seeing a way that I can unmute her. And so if I can't unmute, there has to be a way for me to unmute. That's the whole purpose of what. Welcome to live radio. This is where the host gets to really think about what he's doing because he's way over his head at the moment and on pages that he does not recognize. But that's the way hostship works sometimes. So I can see that what I'm going to need to do is some minor tricks of the trade. And minor tricks of the trade basically mean keep talking while lots of stuff is going on, and eventually somebody will be able to take the reins and run with it because, that's just the way it goes. Everybody is here for their own business. And let me get back to quite frankly, because quite frankly, I like quite frankly. Quite frankly is a TV show, and it's a radio show on YouTube. And what YouTube does, all right, time out. Everybody's what's coming down, and we'll get there. We will get there because I know exactly what I'm doing, except I don't know anything at all about what I'm doing. And so we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. I need to go off and get my phone because my phone just clicked with a message from a listener telling me exactly how to do this. But at the moment, I can't go get my phone because I'm on air and I need to keep talking on air. So the quite frankly phenomenon, it is based on a person from New York City area talking about his perspective in the world. I have lived in New York City, and the New York City perspective of the world is basically everything operates at 3 times the normal pace of anywhere else in the world. So the activity of New York keeps your mind in a mental place where you can see connections between everything because there's just so many people to interact with that every perspective point of view is represented in the population in New York City. So no matter who's the New Yorker talking, every other New Yorker has heard it all already and knows better. But because everybody knows better than everybody else, there's some sort of an equivalent mentality that works out that really keeps us going when the going gets rough. And so Frank comes on and he spends the first 20 minutes just talking about the news. And whatever happens to strike his fancy in the news is fair game. And he attempts to talk us through the most ridiculous parts of what the mainstream is reporting. Then he goes of the show and the ants come on. And when you hear the ants, remove your pants, according to the Joker. Ha 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 from Batman. Ha ha ha. And when the Joker from Batman comes on and people start removing their pants, all heck breaks loose. So now I'm joined by Mr. Sofa King Fluffykins, who is frankly, who can explain more some of what was going on to start frankly and get it to the point where 750 to 1,000 people tune in daily to listen to Mr. Frank. You hear, Mr. Fluffykins? Maybe
Hey, how you
not.
doing, man? Yeah, I am. I just caught the
Good.
last end of that. I was trying to get my speaker situated.
That works out well. How did you get to find, quite frankly, when he was out there?
I literally stumbled upon him by accident. I don't even remember how it happened. I think he just kind of popped up in my feed, and I watched the show and was just instantly like a magnet. I couldn't get away from him.
Yeah, I remember distinctly when somebody said, "Oh, you got to check this guy out. He's funny." And being that I'm a New Yorker from way back when, I'm nearly 60 years old now. Well, actually, I am 60 years old now. I'm nearly 61. But the idea that New Yorkers have a distinct sense of humor that can be tipped off by another New Yorker set me going. And once I learned what he was talking about, it's just amazing. The amount of perspective given by one person who knows everything about everything without knowing anything about anything. So Frank is, I don't know, how would you describe Frank as a person before we describe him as a host?
I think he's got a tenacity that a lot of people lack. Plain and simple.
Yeah,
He doesn't like to give up, and he's he's just as critical of the right as he is of the left. He doesn't pull his punches, and I don't know.
It seems to me that one of the things that I find most interesting about the show is that he asks the questions that I want the interviewer to ask. Most of the time, I sit there watching an interview, and a person will say something, and it's controversial and it needs investigation because can't let people just slip things in without getting them to clarify. And somehow Frank, from quite frankly, just seems to hone in on that one key issue and work it until there's an understanding of what we're talking about. And sometimes I think the people who he's interviewing come to conclusions that they haven't come to before just from the nature of the questioning.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that for sure. He he has the ability to take things apart and just bring to light things that you wouldn't normally think of, and I enjoy the fact that there the age group of people that are in the chat or watching him, it just spreads the gamut. Um, and just my like in real life friends, um, whenever I'm around at 7 p.m. or whatever, they have to listen to it. And I don't care if they like it or not. And for a little while, it was pretty bad with a buddy of mine. His girlfriend was just a hardcore lefty, just idiot. And she would just read all the time. And it got to the point where he's like, man, just don't play that anymore, And they eventually broke up, whatever. I'll go back over there. We'll play it. He loves it now. He loves the show. And my weed man, kid's like 19 years old. He loves, quite frankly, he loves listening to him. He doesn't sit and chat or anything, but he loves listening to him.
Yeah, sitting in chat is a completely different phenomena from listening to the show. And when I listen to the show, which is virtually every day, here it's on at 4:00. And when I go in, I sort of always first thing off say hello to anybody who's in the chat room. And the responses you get from the chat room are usually just the normal hellos, but it goes deeper. I mean, how would you describe the family that the Frankly chat room has become?
Well, I guess from my personal experience, I don't know if a lot of you remember the episode or watched the episode where I divulged, and by the way, I'm GDSOB in the chat over there.
Okay.
Where I divulged basically a lifelong tumultuous relationship with a demon that has been essentially sealed to me by a great-great-grandfather. I never thought I'd put that out there to anybody. You know, some of my closest friends have no idea. And it really allowed me a platform to be like, all right, I'm gonna put this out there, and it is what it is, and you know, we'll go from there. And I guess it just allowed me a comfort zone that I wouldn't, you know, had never had with a basic audience that, you know, will essentially never meet me per se. And it's, you know, the people in the chat from, you know, from all the other mods to all the other people that are just diehard. Frankly, it's you know, you can hit them up in messages, you can talk to them on Discord, and it's just a lot of fun, loving bullshitting back and forth, you know. I really look forward to it every day. I really do.
Yeah, it's by the time I get there every day, somebody's always got a story for Frank. In the chat, well, he takes a lot of phone calls. And the fact that when it comes time to question things, he can just say, okay, we'll open the lines and here's the numbers. The regulars who start chatting just provides so much entertainment. It's like a continuing individual soap opera with some of these folks. And I know that as GDSOB, you've got a wrench. Perhaps we should explain to folks what a wrench means in the video, because I expect more people will start picking up this format because it really does carry a listening audience.
Yeah, funny story about that wrench. Actually, it was an accident. Abe was doing a new credit roll, and he had thought that I was a mod before and threw me in the credit roll as a mod, and then realized I wasn't. And then he hit me up and he's like, hey, so I got a problem. Either I need to change the credit roll or I can make you a mod. What do you want? And I'm like, well, whatever you feel, dude. If you and Frank feel that's cool, that's cool. You know, I'll do it. It did kind of, I guess, rub some people the wrong way, I guess, to an extent. But, you know, that's neither here nor there anymore. But, you know, as far as like allowing people to call in and just give whatever wild story or wild theory they have, you know, that's what I love about him, because he will entertain everything. And he'll, you know, it's the people in the chat will tear them up or lift them down, you know, either way. But it's always with love and sincerity. It's not out of maliciousness, I don't think. You know, some of the flat earthers and weird stuff that goes around like that, and fake massive moon landings and this and that, you know, I'm not going to stretch my head around that. But he allows his audience to engage the show and engage the rest of the audience, which I have yet to find in any other podcast.
Yeah, the fact that the audience engages the audience when they're on the phone with the host talking. And it's funny because he can't really see the chat room when he's going on. And I know how that works because I'm here with a chat room running. And if I go out to the chat room to look at what's going on, I tend to start laughing and lose my contact with the person who I'm talking to on air, because there's so much going on in the chat room that it's highly distracting, which is part of the entertainment value for what we're dealing with. So who's your favorite person in the chat over there? Who do you like when they call in and speak? I don't have your audio right now. Why do I not have your audio?
Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Now I can hear you.
I'd say, man, that's a hard choice.
I know there's so many good speakers. Now that he's got Jim Lee coming on, I really do enjoy Jim Lee immensely. Hey, Twisted Wizard, welcome.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're very faint, but I can hear you okay. I've got Mr. Sofa King Fluffykins, who is also known as GDSOB on Quite Frankly, and we're discussing how the show runs because it's just the most entertaining 2 hours on the internet right now.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone. I just decided to drop in to see if Here, I'll mic out, okay? I'll let you guys talk.
Certainly. And welcome. Yeah, I think one of my
favorite, I guess, one of my most favorite recent additions is Black Conservative Patriot. Because I have a lot of black friends that are hardcore Democrats, and I'll send them the link to one of his latest videos, and you know, they lose it. They're like, "No way, this guy's a fake black guy." Da, 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 da. It's just like, whatever, man, right on, you know.
Yeah, I do like BCP. Black Conservative Patriot is a guy who really knows what he's talking about constitutionally. And I spent a lot of years running around with a constitution in my back pocket. One of the things I'd like to do on a grander scale is figure out how to flip governance so it's back at human scale. And the way Frank runs his chat room, it is pretty much all at human scale. Individuals get to have conversations with individuals, and it's like a group meeting of 600 to 800 people. I was there one day when it got over 1,000, but only briefly, then it dropped back. So I'm really looking for those numbers to increase. But there's another factor in all this, and that is that YouTube doesn't provide accurate analytics anymore for anything. And so that when you're looking at the number of people listening or following somebody, it doesn't really bear relevance to what's going on in actual reality. You get that impression also?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, their manipulation of the algorithm and stuff. It took so long for him to break that 27,000 subscriber mark, and he's finally at 28,000. You know, so hopefully that'll be the little push that he needs to break into the, you know, 35,000 range or so. Who knows? I just know that his, you know, he lives, eats, and breathes this show on top of everything else he does. And, you know, he makes it a point to go out of his way nearly every damn day to make sure that his patrons are engaged, the regular chatters are engaged, you know. And it's just something that you don't really find too often. Now, I think honestly, YouTube it's not the best place for him. You know, maybe a migration to a different platform would serve him better, but at this point in the game, it's a means to the end, I guess, if that makes sense. But I definitely think he's going to get some kind of boost that'll put him up over a threshold, and he will garner the attention that he deserves.
I think he's got a lot larger audience than a lot of people who YouTube tells me have a much larger audience than he does. About the same time he started, I was also listening to You Are Free TV, and the gal there, who we call Free because she's never said what her name is another person who has an awesome personality for the internet. But when you look at the difference between the two channels, it's like night and day. Free has a good collective following her, but if you're looking at her videos, the chat might have 75 to 100 comments. If you go into a quite frankly chat room and you look at the live chat through the 2-hour radio show, I would think that 20 or 30,000 comments fly through that chat room because everybody's going full time. There's also a feature of the chat room that I particularly like is if you use the @ symbol and target somebody's name, you can have it come up to their attention when it flashes on their screen. It changes color. And so you can keep private conversations or directed conversations going with different individuals. And that is a feature that I really find phenomenal also.
Yeah, absolutely. It allows the show to keep going and us to talk amongst ourselves about whatever subject matter, whether it's Tud talking about smearing bagels or whatever it may be. He encourages us to do that, and so I think that's why I enjoy it so much, and everyone is so god dang nice, and I freaking love them.
Yeah, we do have a very polite system, although the mods sometimes get on people. And it's funny. It's the one chat room that, if a troll shows up, by the time they've left, they've had their psychic experience because everybody in the chat room seems to pick on the troll.
Oh, yeah.
There was a troll last night that didn't last more than about 8 or 9 minutes once we figured out it was a troll. But, he sometimes gets phone calls that are obvious trolls, and he can roll right with it and talk to a troll without making the troll seem like a troll.
Yeah, and he'll let it slide off his back. He doesn't. He's like, all right, takes it with a grain of salt and goes to the next caller. It's great.
Yeah, and people, I think, get to play personalities that are different from the personalities they carry out into the real world. I have to laugh at some of the people like Nikki Solis and Jenny. We have so much fun with the comments they throw back at people, and there's really a spin that if you say something that can be taken out of context, it's almost guaranteed that it will be taken out of context.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I enjoy Big Pump so much. He just makes people lose their shit. And he a lot of people don't understand that's just part of his character. It's like Gadget Doc when he calls in with all the background noise and the dog barking and always forgetting to pause the show. That's part of his shtick, man. People just don't even realize it. You take it for being literal, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure Big Pump is gangster as fuck. Excuse my language. But he likes to purposefully incite people, and he's just kind of that crazy New Yorker, and he's that segment of the show that is rooted in the beginnings of Frank,
Yeah. And Big Pump is a guy who has the screen name King 40, and he's a New Yorker who doesn't live in New York, but he's got the attitude. And he likes to call in and take people to task for saying things that doesn't agree with his attitude. And his attitude is that he's the coolest person in the world and everyone does what Big Pump tells them to do because he's the coolest person in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you just got to laugh at the stuff he says, and the way he goes after the women in the chat room to try and get them all collected as his dates is always funny too. I always wonder, would you take a date into the Quite Frankly chat room? And I don't know if I would or if I wouldn't. Then again, at 60 years old, a lot of people that I know wouldn't get Frank at all. But that's the problem with the world today, is that people don't get people like Frank, and they get upset that there are people out there when, in all essence, the amount of information that I get about what's going on in the world when I do my fact checking really is supported by the people who are watching the show, knowing what's going on and presenting him with good information. When he asks a question, it always seems that the proper caller comes in and makes the link. And so if Jim Lee is talking about something and he says something that gets me going, I feel perfectly comfortable to call into the show and say, well, yeah, Jim said this, and let me explain a little further. I'm a regular there now to the point where the regulars recognize me, but that wasn't always the case. I spent a good portion of time in the chat room just trying to observe what was going on. And so what I find is that the participation level in the chat room is enough that if I didn't pay any attention to what was coming out and just spent my time reading the chats, I'd be up to date in just about everything going on. And as I said, the chat doesn't necessarily have to follow what's going on in the show.
Yeah. And as far as, whether or not you would bring a date into the Quite Frankly chat, I think that would be a determining factor for me. If my girl can't stand it, then you beat feet, dude. I have very few requirements, and I might have to throw a Quite Frankly chat in there also. She's got to know how to defend herself. She's got to carry a gun. She's got to like Quite Frankly.
Yeah. What do you think? How many people do you think actually remove their pants to listen to his broadcast?
Oh, I don't know. I'd say maybe 60%. I bet you.
I don't know. I don't. I always laugh at it, but I'm in a situation where I can do anything I want. If I wanted to listen naked, I'm usually got nobody around to bother me. And so to me it's just what's convenient. But I do laugh at all the insinuations that come from the double innuendos that have to do with sex, because it's all flying in the chat room. And when somebody says something that can be misinterpreted sexually, that's always a high point for the chat room to jump on. And I really think that sex is a barrier in the world these days because it's been used in so many ways that people find themselves more deflated from the experience than inflated. It's a lot of work, and the benefits of the work are supposedly that you have a friendship, but too often nowadays it seems sex is more a barrier to friendship than not. But in the Frankly chat room, boy, I just have to laugh all the time. And the girls are worse than the guys. They really are.
Oh, yeah. That's what makes it so much fun. And even a lot of the older ladies, some of the older ladies that I chat into and, tell them how beautiful they are, or what, you know, I don't know what these people look like. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But you know, they take it in stride and they roll with it. And some of them are just as old as yourself, you know, and I think that's half the reason they like to come.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, maybe a euphemism or whatever. Maybe that's not the right word I'm trying to look for, but it's just something to basically, you know, not take our inhibitions, make us all kind of equal and bare and vulnerable, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. No matter who you are, the conversation gets uncomfortable at some point because there are people willing to say just about anything just to see what the reaction of other people are, but it has to be kept in taste. And the mods will just start booting people if they start shouting by typing in all caps, or if
Yeah.
they actually start acting rude to other people in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and I usually won't boot anyone or hide the channel from anyone unless they insult the guests that he has. You know, I've seen a lot of people insult like Jim Lee and Black Conservative Patriot, and I'll hide the channel from them. I don't care. As far as like the caps and stuff like that, it's just for continuity of the chat room because it makes it, you know, people are on different platforms on their phone and whatnot, and it makes it difficult to follow 700 people talking when someone is theoretically, quote unquote, yelling, you know, with all caps. And it's funny, you know, they lose their shit after they figure out who timed me out, you know, and like, you know, well, you know, you're sitting there being told over and over and over, or my favorite is the ones that, you're censoring me. Bitch, Frank doesn't censor anybody. Like, no, that's not, don't play that game. Your troll energy is too low. It's not going to work here. Go play on CNN stream or go play with Alex Jones, you know?
Yeah, I miss the troll called Barry White because he really got into the spirit of trolling and could keep up with the Franklies and dish it back and forth. But eventually, so many people must have gotten on him that he found other places to troll. And now it's almost like there's a troll rating system in that most trolls don't come anywhere near the mythical Barry White troll.
No, not at all. He's probably the ultimate troll I've seen on multiple channels. And I haven't seen him come back for a while. And I kind of miss the guy. You know, it's all Jews and it's all transvestites and and whatever, you know, but it's just so far out there. It's like, all right, dude, whatever, you know. Some of the stuff he says is kind of poignant. Some of it is just so over the top. You know, he's just trolling and to just take it for what it's worth, you know. But some people, they have their feelings too involved, and so they, you know, freak out.
Yeah, and you know, it might be nice for me to one day go through an entire show and just sit on the chat room and look for how many people freak out in the chat room. Because there's probably every 2 minutes somebody else freaks out over something. And usually the freakouts are what cause the major threads of the conversation, that or the bad puns. And there are so many bad puns flying in, quite frankly, that you just have to laugh at almost everything.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
So what do you think is it that really glues everything, that brings it so that people don't want to miss their 7 o'clock show?
I think it's people, they want to know from day to day anything that's changed and what Frank's opinion is and how he breaks it down. And they're you know, they're thirsty for knowledge, and they feel comfortable, and you know, they know that they can ask whatever question or direct a super chat or whatever, and he'll read it, and you know, he definitely lets the audience have an amount of control that, like I said, you don't find that anywhere in any other stream. At least I haven't.
Yeah, I think the control that the audience has to make the show really, I mean, most of the guests that he interviews hang in the chat room when they're not being the guest on the show. So I've seen both Jim Lee and Black Conservative Patriot in the chat room chatting on other people's shows and throwing the same comments around that we throw around when they appear. And so it's one of those things where what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and that there's really no hierarchy except that you're expected to carry your own weight with what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had
if you bring something to the table, you know, the onus is on you. Now, I think Frank will, you know, let you speak your mind, but he'll definitely put his 2 cents in and either refute it or support it, you know?
Yeah, and the guests that don't have a good conversation with Frank, you can tell when he's not into a guest immediately. His attention wanes and the questions don't get there. But the guests that he's into are great, and the choices of what he chooses to pick on really have me laughing. I think that he really got Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez elected by picking on her so much that she became a household name for everybody watching the show, and that whoever this woman was, she did a heck of a job of marketing once it was real that she had a chance. And I think that's the system by storm, because I think the Congress critter that had been in her district sitting there for 10 years and rising through the Democrat party never saw it coming and got so far behind, because let's face it, people who've been educated in the last 10 years at a college level really know how to use the technology well. That's one of the things that college is good for, is putting technology into people's hands and getting them to use it and then expand the borders of how to use it. And so what I'm looking at is something where we could take the quite frankly chat room, figure out who's in which congressional district, form a quite frankly party, and run a whole bunch of Franklies for Congress, each cross promoting each other, and make it into a game where 2 years from now we've got 530 people running for Congress. Well, no, you only get 435 running for Congress for the House in any given time. And then you get 33 running for Senate. And boy, isn't Washington messed up?
Yeah, yeah. You know, in a perfect world, a bunch of us might be able to run, but I don't. Me personally, nah.
No, there's absolutely no reason to participate in the political system, because you have to take 20 to 30 years of time to get anything done. And it's not worth the time, because we're not going to have the political system for that long.
Yeah.
But most of the people in Frank's chat room buy into the political system, and it would be real hard to convince them to drop the system. It's one of the reasons I don't go there in the chat room, because a lot of his followers do seem to be Republicans. And I think there's a difference between Republicans and Trump supporters. I've been following Donald Trump for quite a while, and Trump was actually on the Democratic liberal side of the aisle for most of the time I've been following him. And it was only under the Obama administration that Trump went into the Republican Party. And I think the reason he went into the Republican Party was because he could see the possibility of getting nominated through that cast of characters back in 2016. And I wasn't paying attention to any politics at that time. I was still coming off of my being a hermit, and I didn't really start figuring out what was going on in the world until maybe March 2017, 2018. And one of the things I started doing in March 2018 was looking at the alternative media to find out who was speaking truth and who wasn't speaking truth. And Frank wasn't even part of the game when I set it up. I had 64 different alt media websites, and I was looking through processes of elimination for when people would say something that I would say, okay, it's not worth taking them at face value. And most of the people in the alt media spend their time responding to the lamestream media and trying very, very hard to write a counter narrative to a false narrative. Whereas I kind of think that the idea of the false narrative is to not give it any credence and just run with it, not try and correct it. Current events right now. If you want to talk current events with me, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What do you see going on with where the president has gone in the last week? Why is the government suddenly open for 3 weeks? Is it to appoint an attorney general, or is there something else going on there?
Well, I think it's got a few different facets to it. I think, appointing the attorney general is one of them. He definitely wasn't compromising anything to open it back up for these 3 weeks. And I think after the attorney general is appointed, that's when the FISA D-class comes, and that's when a lot of pain is going to hit. He's well ahead of people, and he's watched from afar the corruption and stuff, and I think he just got sick of it, and he's like, all right, I'm going to play your game against you guys, and I'm going to use the tools that you guys have used against the American populace for the last 2 decades or whatever. I'm going to use it against you, and we're going to make it hurt. And he honestly, he wants to return the power to the people. And he's doing the job for free, and everyone would say, oh yeah, well, he's a billionaire, da 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 da. Well, yeah, he is, but he divested himself of those companies right now, and he's literally working for free. And like Frank said the other night, the dude is the most investigated, he has had a FISA warrant on him, other surveillance, and his friends, and they still can't find shit. They, like Frank said, they were so desperate they went and found some Russian hooker in a Thailand jail that said she had info on Donald Trump, and went to go interview her because they're that desperate. And he knows they're that desperate, and they play into his hand. And I think the government shutdown was a show of force on his part to be like, look, if you guys aren't going to play, we'll do this the hard way. And so we had the stint of however many days it was. And I think he's prepared to do it again. And I think he's gonna get the funding he needs, and he's gonna build the wall, and he's gonna protect us. And it's much to the chagrin of a lot of these lefties and a lot of this evil that is continually going. And I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I'm not sure he's actually playing the left-right game. I think he's gonna end up doing some things that piss off the far right also, that it's
Yeah.
not just lefties. I think that the reason Trump was recruited by the Patriots to be in the role has to do with his business acumen in handling bankruptcy, that he went through a bankruptcy in Atlantic City, New Jersey in the late 1960s or early 1970s when he had built the first Trump casino. And he came out of the bankruptcy, repurchased the casino, and cleared off about $3 million in debt in the process of doing it. And the people that were left holding the bag were the banksters. And so he managed to work it through the system to where he came out smelling like roses. And as you look through the travails of Donald Trump, there's other times when, as a businessman, a position that no poker player would have ever picked up the cards at the table and
No.
played it to make it work.
Oh.
So I find that Trump has a lot more going for him that people don't necessarily see because it's all presented polarized in terms of Republicans versus Democrats.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it posed in people versus the 1% or the
Right.
0.1% or the 0.01%.
Right. And to real quickly interrupt you if I can, on that note, when he said that the Federal Reserve is more of a problem for him than China, that cemented in me that this dude ain't fucking around. When he called out the Federal Reserve, that was a massive, massive step. And I do honestly think that the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserve, I'm sure we all here know that, I think it's going to be absorbed into the Treasury, and I think we're going to go back to some kind of gold or platinum or silver or whatever commodity-based backing for the dollar, and it's going to throw off these chains that the Federal Reserve has heaped upon us for, decades upon decades. So when he did that, that really cemented to me, all right, I better start paying attention to this guy. I mean, I was paying attention to him, but when he said that, I was like, all right, this dude, he's not messing around. You don't call out the Federal Reserve, and you don't step on those toes without having a massive gun in your back pocket.
Yeah, I had previously done some work with G. Edward Griffin, the author of the Jekyll Island book. And so I was up to all Federal Reserve thing as it came down. And Trump is absolutely right in how he's dealing with the Federal Reserve. It's time to remove their power and bring it back under governance. But it's also time to look at the form of governance and figure out how to do a new soft boot, because the people who represent other people in Congress have become such a narrow niche of qualified people that it's gotten to be an old boys club and a small group of people dictating to a large group of people what's going on. And there's absolutely no way these Congress critters should be getting rich, selling influence to lobbyists. That we have to have some sort of rule that once you go to work for the government, if you're accepting a government salary, you shouldn't be able to go back into the private sector. If you're going to work for the government without accepting salary like Trump does, then going back to the private sector afterwards might be okay. But you can bet that everybody is scrutinizing Donald Trump right now to make sure that he's not using his position to his personal advantage. Again, more than anyone else in the world.
Yeah.
So we know that if Trump wasn't totally ethical, the Mueller probe or some of these other things would have brought him down. But the fact that we're still playing with a Mueller probe, what do you think? Are these indictments real? Are they fake? Are they after something different than what we think they're after? What's going on?
I don't. There's a whole theory of Mueller being a white hat. That he's running these investigations as a cover for, looking into the whole uranium one and the fires abuse and all that other stuff. I don't know. I don't know where that's going. He's wasted millions upon millions of dollars, and and just continues just trashing Trump as much as he can. So that's what makes it hard for me to think, okay, well, is this guy really on our side? And, he's just pulling a big, huge head fake.
Yeah.
If that's true, that's going to be a major, that's going to be a major coming to God for a lot of people. They could be like, oh, shit. We thought he was going after Trump this whole time, but he wasn't.
Yeah, and I think what we're being told are the targets of investigations are just false flags to get us looking away at where the real targets of investigations are.
Yeah.
And on a local level, there is so much corruption in local government around here because the checks and balances aren't in place. I live in a rural county in Oregon, and the size of the county that I live in is larger than the state of Connecticut. And yet we're run by 3 good old boy county commissioners who are tied in with the timber industry. And so anytime there's stuff going on between the federal government and the locals here, it involves tying up resources so that we're lumber based. How can you do lumber base if you're not allowed to cut a tree?
Yeah.
But then again, go ahead.
Hopefully that'll be taken out too. He decriminalized hemp. He took hemp off the Schedule 1 narcotics list. It's proven time and time again through historical data that hemp you can grow, 4 or 5 times the amount of plant matter and biomass than you can in a tree, and it's highly renewable. As far as textile uses and everything else, you can do so much with it. It's not just about smoking it. And I honestly think that's going to be another ace up his sleeve is the decriminalization federally of marijuana. The hemp was the first step. You've got a bunch of, even like in Kentucky, you've got a bunch of Kentucky tobacco farmers that are like, screw this, we're not farming tobacco anymore. We're growing hemp. So it's a kickstart to a multi-billion-dollar industry that is literally your ground level right now. Even with the amount of saturation that Oregon has, Oregon has supposedly 1 million pounds in surplus of weed stuck in their borders that they can't get out because they can't take it across the border. And
I can pick up a pound here for $200.
Holy Jesus. Oh my God, are you kidding me?
If I want better stuff, it might go up to 300, but growers can't get 500, and it costs more than 500 to grow it.
Yeah.
The cost balance has gone all the way skewed because of the legalization. And what they did here in Oregon, they should have used the Colorado model. Colorado at least gave localities the call on their own stuff. But in Oregon, we have dispensaries, and the dispensaries tend to sell marijuana a gram at a time. Just think of what the markup value is selling stuff at $5 or $6 a gram when ounces and pounds are usually what people transfer when, at least historically, through all the years I smoked, and I've been smoking marijuana now for 42 years. It's not something that I just picked up yesterday, but
Yeah.
the healing stuff going on with marijuana has gotten the attention of the big pharma boys. And I think that a lot of what's going on here is dictated by what's going on with big pharma. But we're going to have a 5-acre grow of hemp this spring on the property I live on.
Right.
So I can speak firsthand for what the power of hemp is. And the CBD oils that they talk about producing from hemp can definitely help the total health of the nation if it's done right.
Yeah.
There's a cannabinol system that works within everybody that is there because the body produces some natural cannabinols. And so your receptors are already ready for the metabolism of marijuana. But it's funny, I found a different smoking herb. It's called mullein. And I smoke mullein because I have COPD. And you would think that smoking something would be awful if you're having breathing problems.
Right.
But what the mullein does is it constricts what is dilated and it opens up your breathing passages. So 2 or 3 puffs of mullein and an asthmatic can breathe again.
Huh.
Why isn't there a mullein-based pharmaceutical out there? Why do they use the albuterol stuff that makes people psychotic?
Yeah, I've not even heard about that. That's interesting in and of itself. My other point about the whole marijuana legalization is another ace up his sleeve is it's a massive blow to the cartels. You know, who it used to be, 20 years ago, you get a pound and it was full of brick weed from Mexico and full of seeds and stems and shit. Like, I can't find regs. I can't find it. It's impossible. So a lot of that shit, as Americans, we don't want it. We're growing our own, dude. And even if not, I got a buddy that sends me shit from Humboldt County, so I don't care. I know it's not going into some Mexican cartel back pocket, and it literally it's hurt them bad. That's why they've switched and found that human trafficking is a lot more money. So he's attacking a lot of this organized crime on so many different levels that they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, trying to figure out new ways to keep their cancerous, nefarious actions alive, and he's 5 steps ahead of them. So I honestly do think that he's going to federally decrim it. He's already federally decrimmed the hemp, taken off Schedule 1, and that was the first step. And I think it's, we're over the halfway point, I believe, as far as states medicinally. Here in Florida, we're medicinal. We can't grow our own yet. You can only have vaporizable or edibles. There's a lot of bureaucracy and that, but as a whole, we're being allowed that choice, and we're not going to be thrown in jail and have our absolute life completely ruined because we want to smoke a joint or a blunt or whatever. I'm a 100% service connected disabled veteran with weed and with kratom. If I didn't have those two, I'd be back in the VA and I'd be on fentanyl or morphine. I was on fentanyl for 20 years. That shit's a set of handcuffs. It's worse than heroin. I don't give a shit what anybody says. And when I came back from Italy this last time, I basically was faced with being in between doctors, and I had no choice. I'd run out, and I went through withdrawals. It was the worst shit of my life. It lasted over a month and a half. And after that, I said, there is no way I'm doing that again. A, because I'm a complete asshole, very, very aggressive on opiates. and not very aggressive on weed. And coupled with kratom, I can, you know, keep that pain level subdued enough to where I can deal with it, and I'm not whacked out of my brain on a bunch of opiates. So, you know, he's opening up a lot of avenues for people to put power into their own damn hands.
Tell me a little bit more about kratom.
Well, it's you know, I believe it comes from Malaysia. I forget the actual name for it, the scientific name. It's a leaf, and they grind it up. It mimics the opiate receptors in your brain, so it will actually fill those receptors. There's a few different strains. There's like a red strain, a green strain, and a white strain. So the green is more of a kind of gets a calming effect, more of a downer, I guess you could say. But it doesn't make you all weird or anything like that. The red vein is the more, I guess, more focusy, more like kind of energetic. And then the white vein is a mix between the two. I have more luck with the Mang Da, which is a green vein. And it's, you know, I'm out right now, but I'm going to get some here shortly. I just take a teaspoon, a heaping teaspoon, and a few ounces of hot water and just shoot it down. It tastes like hell, but it's cheaper that way instead of buying the capsules. But as far as pain control, buddy, let me tell you, I have some days where I've, you know, just want to cut my head off. And as long as I can get some kratom, it'll take the edge off to where I can deal with it, and I'm not thinking in the back of my mind, all right, well, let me just go ahead and make an appointment with the VA and let them slap me full of drugs again, you know?
Yeah, they're not going to give you kratom.
No.
I have a friend who uses kratom, and you can tell that about 45 minutes after she's had her red kratom mixed with some juice, she comes back into a normal state, and she can tell when she needs it. Yeah. And typically it's one of those things where if she has no energy for the day at the beginning of the day, her use goes into the yellow and green, I guess, kratoms. But if she's been up and doing things and then starts wearing out, then it's a red kratom day.
Right.
I found it hard for the taste, but yeah. I have learned that I can pack things into capsules on my own. And making capsules of kratom has never really been a problem. When I tried it, I wasn't in need of anything that it could do for me, and so it didn't do much for me. But that's okay. I really believe that it should be readily available, but it seems like right now it's not listed by the FDA, and that they're after people who use kratom as criminal.
Yeah, they're trying to make it illegal. Yeah.
What is it about the government that wants to make healing illegal?
I mean, honestly, it sounds so simplistic and stupid, but they make more money keeping us sick, dude. They don't want us healthy. They want us, well, they do want us healthy enough to pay our taxes and work our fingers to the bone, but not healthy enough to actually do something to change some shit, you know?
Yeah. I get the impression that the whole system is set up to keep people working, and there's just not enough work to go around. And if they made it that only 20% of the people worked, but the 20% of the people working had full responsibility for keeping everything working and were extremely well compensated for that, that people could spend maybe 10 years of their life working in a position and then have the rest of their life to focus on whatever it is they think they want to focus on and not have to work for 40 years to build up a pension that's going to evaporate in the next couple months anyway.
Sure.
I've been out of the system for long enough that I'm now of the age where I have to get back into the system in order to qualify for my Social Security that I've put into the system. And I'm really trying to decide whether I want to do that or not, because I really don't want to go into the system. But as a chemist over the years, I've made enough money that it all went into the system. I paid it. I should be able to draw it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've been having problems with Real ID. And it turns out that in Oregon didn't have Real ID until 2016. And so now Oregon will not accept an old Oregon license as an ID. And so it makes it kind of tough to get into the system when you can't get a license without a birth certificate, and you can't get a birth certificate without a license.
Yeah.
And then the government doesn't want to talk to itself. They want me to talk to each of the two separate sides. And I can understand why Oregon wants a birth certificate, because they have been going through all this stuff to get us all financialized so that the straw man that we represent makes a lot of money for the banking cartels, and that we don't see that money, but they bond us for certain types of work, and then they draw more money off us. And if you happen to bounce out of the system, well, then they target you and want to get rid of you. And right now, the ways that they target people are just so overboard that I wonder, is everybody a target of our own government at this point?
Yeah, it begs that question for sure. It does seem like that to an extent. The
So
laws are built to where every day we're unknowingly basically committing felonies and have, or at least in the very least misdemeanors. They've created so many laws to make sure that they can nail us with whatever, and it's a whole big cat and mouse game.
It's difficult to keep track of the laws, but I was always taught that ignorance of the law was no excuse, and you're supposed to know the laws that govern you. When Congress puts out 10,000 pages of law a year and you can't even read it until after it's passed, how are we, the people, supposed to affect these laws?
Yeah.
I don't wish to be an anarchist, but the rule of law is a rule of lawyers, and the lawyers have co-opted the language to not mean anything like what it means to you or I. Yeah. And if we were to take Webster's dictionary and compare it to Black's Law Dictionary, there's a lot of words that legally mean the exact opposite of what Webster tells us they mean in the vernacular. So they want us to be responsible for following the law, but then they don't want to tell us how to fulfill that responsibility. I don't think we can play that game very much longer.
No, I don't either.
So what do we go to? Is there a way where local resources can be redistributed to local population? And how would that look? Because it's a lot different resources in an urban area versus resources in a rural area. And the systems that we've built up have allowed the corporations to insinuate themselves as the in-between handlers of all the material, so that instead of having somebody grow and sell it to somebody who's going to use, there's 5 or 6 steps in the middle. And that's where the states are making their money on the marijuana, is by getting a lot of handling costs and putting themselves in between the growers who they're lowballing. and then charging the consumers very high amounts. And most of that's just going to bribes within the legal system to allow it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what it'll take to bring things back to a more localized level. I have no idea. That's way above my pay grade.
I understand that one. I've been working on ways of doing it, and what I call the new way is just to take everything we knew and weigh it again. But we've got so much that has been indoctrination from the education system that I'm not even sure science is true anymore. I've got a doctorate in chemistry, and I know that chemistry is good up to a point, but I also know that when I was teaching chemistry to freshmen in college, we taught soft chemistry rather than hard chemistry because you had to understand the soft stuff and know the basics of things to see how the mechanisms work before you get complicated. But the chemistry and the biology don't interface. And so the biologists don't think much of the chemistry, and the chemists don't really work on the scale of applied biology to even think of it at all. So there's some real disconnects between some very smart people who ought to be sharing information and coming to conclusions, but you can't argue with the scientific dogma. And right now, we live in a world of 3 coordinates in space and 1 coordinate in time, and none of that is real. So we've already put ourselves on limits that are beyond keeping us from reaching the capacity that we could have without those limits, and they're all artificial.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the Quite Frankly chat room, because I think that people have more say in that chat room than anywhere else I've seen, and that people can come out with things and other people in the chat room will pick it up, and by the time it's munched over a bit, there's usually some good conclusions on how to change stuff. Not that it goes anywhere, because there's nowhere to go from there. So what can we do to make it go somewhere from there? Can we have more shows like The New Way that talk about Frank in the evening so that people, I know he'll get 5 more listeners here because this group did not know much about Quite Frankly, because I talk on a lot of things on the radio, but it usually isn't other television and radio. But I'm at the point where if we can't participate in our media, there is no media, because participation is the goal of the game and scale. And if you're not participating, you're letting things happen to you.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the essence of his show is just the engagement of the chat room, and just the engagement of people on the Discord and his super chats and you know, his Patreon questions and stuff like that. He really tries to go out of his way every day to make sure that that all of us know that we can bring him whatever we can, and he'll discuss it and let us hash it over and you know, come out on the other end with a better understanding or a better direction to dig into.
Yeah, and for those listeners who are not familiar, YouTube has a thing called Super Chat that you can do in live chat mode, and it will send money from you, the patron, to the host of the show. But YouTube actually takes, what, a third of what's going and pockets it?
Yeah, 30%.
Yeah, and so that's a rather high cost of doing business, and it for a platform that physically harasses people and doesn't let them really earn money. To be taking that much away is ridiculous. But then he also uses Patreon, and Patreon is just one of those annoying things that seem to have come about in the YouTube community where everybody now wants you to go support them on Patreon. And I don't know how Patreon does it, but they manage to really antagonize everybody using Patreon to the point where folks are now ready to jump ship. Do you know what happened there?
Yeah. They're jumping ship and going to Subscribestar, and I guess Subscribestar was shut down because PayPal pulled their funding. So there is again a bunch of conglomerates getting in line to stifle popular opinion or popular belief, and it's going to force people to look for different avenues and different structures. And, you know, so that birthed, apparently Subscribestar got their funding back, and it's, you know, I haven't really looked into it as much that I should, but I definitely think it's a definite sign of the times for sure that, you know, that YouTube grew from such a very organic, just a very free for all to now it's just so regimented, and you got to really watch what you say, and there's a whole other side of it that's, you know, kind of nefarious, but it's working against them, and I think other platforms are going to come out and blossom because of that. And I think, you know, for instance, if it gets to a point where Frank has to leave YouTube and go to something like DTube or Subscribestar, you know, he may lose a few thousand people or whatever in the transition, but he will have that much more freedom to drive that show forward as much as he can. And I think that his base will blossom that much more.
Yeah, I think that where I see Frank, quite frankly, going is that once he starts networking and there's cross promotion with the system, I think that there'll be maybe a dozen or 2 dozen other people who have YouTube channels and other notoriety who sign up with Frank, and we can work it where it's going to end up as a peer-to-peer type of system rather than having the controls be in the service providers.
Yeah.
And the ISPs have been failing because they're stuck in the middle of an interface where they're not the best on technology and they're not providing the services necessary. So if they're not using the top technology and they're not providing the services necessary, why are they in the middle of this game in the first place?
Yeah. Well, because they're the only place to go right now, basically.
Yeah, and it's the same thing that really has held up our ability to use things like what's the auction site where people have to go if they want to put an auction up to get rid of something?
Oh, like eBay?
eBay. That's the one. Yeah, eBay is so friggin' fixed anymore that it's just not a fair way of getting rid of your stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that eBay is a monopoly because they have a patent on some technology is so totally ridiculously. The idea of intellectual property really needs to be reconsidered when all this property is the intellectual property is owned on corporate scale, and the humans can't talk about stuff because of copyrights and all sorts of things, non-disclosure agreements, patents. Everything that puts information off limits keeps us from discussing things that people need to know.
Yeah, and it kind of fosters an environment of people being apprehensive to even say anything about it, you know?
Yeah. Hey, are you looking at the chat room right now? Looks like an old friend has popped in the Henri radio room. So he's not on right now. I'm sure he's listening via the steampunk radio, but if he wants to mic in, you bet. One of my favorite people. When I first got started, he was a regular calling in to Quite Frankly. And quite frankly, it was the most entertaining times when Bacon and Frank would talk, and you never knew where the show was going, but it will always led into a good piece of crypto fiction to go look deeper into things. But sometimes I wonder at the animosity that people have for things that are presented as new, because I don't think people were quite ready for a character like Frank Bacon when I first ran into Frank Bacon. But I think that right now, the idea of a Renaissance reconstitution is something that we should really consider, because the quality of knowledge, we're not producing it right now. The Renaissance was a much, much better time for the humans on the face of the earth. But I think that if we get control over some of these situations and take the corporate power structure and rethink it on human scale, so that every individual human has to sign off on their own destiny, that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be
Thank you for that introduction, Lenny. That was nice of you.
Frank.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing pretty well. I'm here talking with GDSOB, and we're talking about the Quite Frankly show today.
I was actually listening to you on the Steampunk Radio website, and then I switched over to this. So it's always nice because I would flip that on and I could listen to you guys. I wouldn't have any interaction because somebody set that up, the steampunkradio.com, and has that embedded player in there, and it's rather cool. But no, Discord is kind of where it's at, because you can get actual, feedback, and you've got I don't know, how many folks do you have in this thing? You've signed up quite a few people, come and gone, haven't you?
Yeah, I have reached the point where I'm well over 100.
Nice.
In the people that are now in this particular chat. And I'm looking at ways of spinning it out into other different places, because a lot of the original purposing that I brought here has totally gone by the boards. And when I was working on the Outdoor Natural Resources Research Institute.
Henri.
Yeah, Henri, because I'm an Henri scientist.
Me too, brother.
And what I found was that it wasn't the right form to be using Discord to try and run a science establishment, that there's a lot of things that need to be run ahead of time to get it up to speed, and that the group theory wasn't quite working.
Right.
But it has to work for every individual in a small group. And as the group builds, the ways of measuring in the group have to change, because if they stay the same, it's giving you an image that was already presupposed.
Yeah,
your data to be measuring.
Yeah, you're projecting your biases out there, and then it's what do they call that? When you're sorry, the morning for me is not good. I always apologize to you for not jumping on your show every time you've invited me, but it's just always difficult. It's nothing personal. The show is fantastic. You're the guy I keep telling people about, that I say, hey, well, I write some really crappy sci-fi, but I have a like a major I don't know what your background was officially with the academia. Like, was it a Bachelor of Arts or whatever? It doesn't matter because I don't see those things. But you're an organic chemist. And I said, well, there's this organic chemist that likes my stuff, so to hell with you. You know, that's my rub. But I started writing crypto fiction 3 years ago because I started a real long 5-year process of recovery from an incredibly, you know, tough situation for me. Maybe not everybody goes through something like this and it's tough for them, but for me it was rather rough, and just went to not planning anymore and doing more things like manifestation and thinking about, you know, where I wanted to stop seeing these biases pop up. And one great idea I had was, hey, what if everybody just kind of stopped this whole concept of thinking they needed a big fan base, or, you know, all these other things they put in front of themselves to just have what they want. And that's when you and I discussed a radio network called Steampunk Radio. And I said, well, it's there. Let's just make it and, you know, see what happens. No planning, nothing like, you know, hey, go raise money or get a sponsor or do this, or when this happens, then this will happen. None of that. Just either do it if that's what you feel like doing. And you'd had a ton of radio experience. You have a wide assessment of topics that you can cover. Did you ever get on the Quite Frankly show? Has Quite Frankly ever interviewed you and talked about the chemtrails and things like that?
We have not. I talked to Frank once or twice early on as just a call-in person, and we were going to get together, but then when he hooked up with Jim Lee's my go-to guy for finding out stuff on chemtrails. So I didn't see a real good reason to try and insert myself once Jim started picking it up.
Sure.
That, and as a scientist, I'm an inorganic chemist, and the atmospheric chemistry was something I was paid to look into.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't paid.
Well, it got you covered in the what on earth are they spraying, or what the hell are they spraying?
Right.
That was a pretty important. That's been seen, you know, hundreds of thousands of times now. You know, people have started to reach into those old docs, you know, and come up with something a little different than what they're.
Yeah. What I find funny about that particular movie is that everything I said in the movie is still true. And here it is 8 years later, and nobody has addressed the basic premise of what's going on.
And, you know, before that, it was 20, 30 years of, hey, there's something in the water, you know, oh, that's good for you. I had a dentist give me that one time. I had a dentist give me the whole rigmarole of why that was good for me, you know, the drinking fluoride. And I only stayed with him because he charged me $100 to pull a tooth. But after that, I stopped going to him. So it's, strange days we're living in. But this is a radio network. I don't know if I've ever talked with you about this concept of kind of how even steampunk radio works. Is like it's not owned by anybody. Nobody's in charge, and so there's no one to go to either shut it off or make it go away or change it. It's up to the individuals that want to, you know, either be a part of it or like that mimetic or want to expand it into a slightly different direction. So, you know, when I was telling Quite Frankly about this way early on in last year, I was still in the middle of quite a bit of recovery things that I needed to be doing. So I couldn't really keep attentive on it. I wasn't watching like all the time and popping in. When I popped in, I would just say some crazy stuff just to get some flair, it's kind of grown. I noticed that Frankly's show has like 27,000 viewers on YouTube now, and hopefully he's still doing, you know, just kick butt and enjoying what he's doing. But I like these in the morning. I like these little get-ins in the morning where I can wake up and start going through my stuff, and I just tune in and listen to what some people have to say, and then it kind of helps me set my day, you know. So I've been a long-term listener of your show more than, believe it or not, more than Quite Frankly, if I can get away with saying that.
I can believe it. I keep track of my listenership because I'm trying to figure out the extent to which it goes. And the numbers that I get are terrible analytics.
Well,
I don't know why it works that way, but nobody's providing good analytical data anymore. They're providing fluff.
Yeah.
And
people are being misdirected by certain analytics. They think some analytics are more important than others. And That's the trickery that I've been trying to re-engineer.
Yeah.
But hey, I didn't mean to cut into all your guests and everything. I know you had other folks in here, so I didn't mean to just jump in and trounce on everybody. I'm Frank. You guys can call me Frank, and I'm around.
In fact, it's entirely a listening audience today. The only person who was talking was Fluffykins.
Oh no, and I chased him off.
No, but his name also from the Frankly chat room is GDSOB, and he's one of the regulars, and we get to talk to him quite a bit.
Hey, Master Whaley and GD and Patient Zero. I've seen you a few times. We've talked. We've connected on Steam or Steam It. And
hey, let's talk about Steam It for a moment, because there's some stuff going on there. What's the status currently? I noticed that my Steam account on a daily basis goes down in value, even though I get incremented up values by making posts. The posts never seem to return me anything more that keeps the value up.
Well, and here's the thing. They broke it from the beginning. These guys, I have to be quite frank here and just tell you that, this all started in 2016 for me. I'd been studying blockchain and projects in blockchain since 2014 at a severely diminished pace. Which was good for me. I was actually very lucky to do this, because it's kind of like you went to a new planet and you had to learn everything, brand new, and you had to rip out all the old conditions. And so what happened with Steam was it was a rushed to market blockchain that tweaked the blockchain in such a way as to use it for a simple little communication platform that these guys really wanted to make a social network platform. Now, social networks have only really been around for 20 years. They've been talked about for 30, 40 years. They've been talking about these things in deep think tanks, like MIT had the Media Lab and have been discussing things for many years about social networks. So the fact that we have them now, people take for granted. They think that they've always been there and that this is what they are. But to me, the social networks that we have are very, very constructive prisons. They're incredibly powerful psychic prisons for people that with the rules of tacit consent, they can do just about damn near anything to the human psyche, and they get away with it all the time. They promote this stuff. There are plenty of stories out there about how they muck with the minds of their people. So when Steam It started, it was this raw engine for basic decentralized identity, and they don't even realize this. But what they did, with identity is truly amazing. Their eye wasn't on that. Their eye was on the bigger prize, which is if you just invent a blockchain and some people adopt it, it'll go up in value, and then if you have a lot of the coin, then you are the bigger, winner. When they built the blockchain, they built it in such a way so that there was a pre-mine of most of the resources. About 80% of the resources came out of that pre-mine and got concentrated into the hands of like 6 accounts. So they essentially broke their economy right out of the gate by creating an oligarchy, and then not really rushing to deflate that oligarchy and spread it out as quickly as possible. The nature of Steam works as thus: like other blockchains have a set amount of issuance. Like Bitcoin, for example, will issue 21 million Bitcoins over its lifetime of 120 odd years or something like that. And it does it at a certain rate so that you can have a predictability of how much the rate of issuance of the currency is going to come in. So you literally have these set variables that you can plug some good math around. With Steam It was meant to have a kind of a big chunk already out of the gate of its issuance of Steam, and it wasn't going to follow a really defined predetermined issuance. It was going to run off an inflation metric. So let's say they had the 21 million Bitcoin, and instead of Bitcoin, it was like 21 million Steam. It was mostly issued all at the front end of the building of the blockchain back in 2016, and got concentrated into the hands of 6 people. So 80% of the economy is sitting in the fewest hands possible. And then the mechanism for new issuance is an inflation rate. And the inflation rate kind of goes down over the years. But the first year was 100%, or I'm sorry, a 10% inflation rate. The next year would be a 9% inflation rate. The next year would be 8, and then 7, then 6, and it would go down. And what it's inflating is it's inflating the amount of steam that's already out. And only if that steam is used in a way that it's powered up as steam powered and it's used as a tension. So in my case, my full power weight at the current price of steam, because I had like 1200, let's say I have 1200 steam power, I have an 8% inflation that runs off a daily a daily rate. So like, for example, I can give 10 full power votes a day. And those 10 full power votes are my using that inflation to give away to other people on the platform. So I don't just get to sit on the amount of steam that I have and it inflates magically. That would be kind of neat, but it's not really functional. For that inflation to take place, in other words, for that new steam to be invented and issued, I have to physically go out and make a vote. So if I vote on your thing, a full power vote is going to be a couple of cents, like 3 or 4 cents right now at the current rate. So 10 full votes means that I can issue 40 cents worth of new steam based on how the network is ruled. But this 80% of the network in the hands of the few makes this small group of whales and super whales. We're actually at the level of like beyond super whales. We're at like the level of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. The guys that run steam took so much in the beginning and didn't work that mechanism for inflation very well, and have instead been acting like, and this is a personal opinion, this would get me in trouble in a lot of places, but I'm going to say it on your show. My personal opinion is the kids that did this, Ned and his crew of people in Steam and the pre-miners, were really just about robbing the bank and making sure that they kept a whole bunch of money for themselves. And that's okay, because humans are greedy, and they're some of the greediest, snottiest people out there. So it's not a big surprise that they would do that. But by doing that, they've really broken the entire Steam network from being a viable, very decent monetary blockchain. I mean, it's been up and down so much, and you know, they're taking their portion of the winnings out right now. They're powering down quite a bit of it. Dan, the actual inventor of Steam, who had only been around for 1 year before leaving to go do EOS, you know, had about $8 million worth of Steam at the time. He had been taking his out. Kid's already a billionaire on EOS, so he took a couple million out of Steam, and you know, that leaves a big kind of hole, because people that are watching this network are thinking, wow, if the inventor of it won't even stick around and use it, why would I use it? But I've been using Steam for 3 years to basically break the idea of the rules that you laid out in intellectual property. So for me, because I actually have a decentralized ID that I have attached to the brand name Frank Bacon, my intellectual property is safe. I may not be making a ton of money with it. That's not the point. It still follows all the basic tenets and rules of how this blockchain was set up, which means that I really earned every bit of my Steam essentially from day one, with the effort of going out there, making posts, and then finding people that have some money behind them to vote on those posts. Like, you can vote on my posts all day long. It's not really going to generate a whole lot, because you're sitting on such a small stake. That's the amount of Steam that you've got
anymore. I remember when you granted me 100 Steam that I could get my 2 cents in.
Yeah, that was a nice time. But you know, of course, because of the market fluctuations and things like that, it's come way down.
Hey,
So
I got a question for you on this topic. We've only got about 7 minutes left. What's the role of these witnesses?
So in order to make this blockchain a very energy efficient blockchain, unlike Bitcoin is a planet boiler. Yeah, it's just going to keep consuming resources because it's a proof of work algorithm. So it incentivizes the network to keep bringing on more and more powerful processors to keep hacking away at that difficulty. And so Bitcoin can grow to massive energy consumption needs just through default. Steemit was meant to be a hybrid, and it's not really a hybrid because it's 95% proof of stake and then only 5% proof of work. So those 20 witnesses are the ones that are providing the proof of work. It's actually a pretty easy, comparatively speaking to other blockchains. This is an easy blockchain to corrupt. In other words, to steal. If you had 20 witnesses that could come online, then you could have a majority of the control over the network. But these witnesses get voted for. So in other words, you know, you could be a witness if you just went out there and put your witness on the network and then asked for votes, and then eventually enough votes would come and make you a one of the 20. You'd go in line with being one of the people that runs this blockchain. So those 20 witnesses are to keep the power consumption down. It only takes 20 computers spread across the network, the internet, either the world or whatever, to keep the state of the blockchain running. And they get a small portion, like they get 1/20th of the amount of steam that's produced. So majority of the steam gets produced through the inflation. That inflation mostly goes towards the attention economy, which is people voting on other people's stuff and inflating that value through proof of attention. And then 5% of the steam comes and just gets dispersed out to the witnesses based on them providing the actual IT support to run the blockchain. It's actually pretty smart little deal for what Steam it is, which is, if you just considered Steam a very basic communication platform that you could put things like a blog post in, or say hi to people, or acknowledge something, then it's a very energy efficient, easy, simple blockchain with 3 years of like near stagnant development. In fact, the development these guys have been doing for the last 3 years is almost reversed of real improvement. They've actually screwed a lot more things up. So not only do I think of them as bank robbers, I think of them as actually unwitting agents of whoever they are that keeps good things from working well for people like us, because I see it as a Gutenberg press. It could literally set a lot of people free. Maybe not here in the United States because nobody knows how to use it, but certainly in like some of the Bahamas or these third world nations who could be using Steam for, a great many things that people here in the States are just, too befuddled with their own condition to ever get out of. So I always saw Steam as the identity layer for my own intellectual property, which I claim to be sci-fi, not the best sci-fi out there. I'm not claiming to be a really good sci-fi author. In fact, I'm a complete hack at it. But that doesn't matter. The blockchain doesn't care, and the blockchain gives me the power to be that author. So it's up to me to go and find the readers that would come in, the network itself doesn't do the Facebook things. It doesn't do the Twitter things. It doesn't do the YouTube things where it creates algorithms and puts your stuff in front of other people. It's raw. It runs off of first come, first serve. So it's literally like a log, an activity log of where all these messages are coming from. And so I see it more as an alert system. So for example, if you're going to do a radio show, the first thing I would do is I would do a post on Steam that say, hey, the show's coming up in 1 hour, be sure to be there. And then I would take that post and I'd go share it on Twitter, or share it on Facebook, or share it on whatever, where they take that post and then they run their analytics and spread it out to more people who can see it.
Yeah, I have had some real problems with the mechanisms of how the transfers work. And so what I've been looking at doing is getting things back to human scale and engineering things from the ground up. And because so many people are interested in using what's taken from the top down and working with it, getting people to start building from the ground up doesn't interest a lot of people.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was kind of breaking up there at the end. I didn't know if you were still going, but yeah, for me, this is the human scale. Very simply, and I can look at it as a big blockchain project, 100,000 users or 1 million users or whatever. It really doesn't matter to me. I mean, I put people I know on this. So it's like my neighbor is on this. My mom is on this. People in my family are on this. My best friend back in another state is on this. And so my human scale is I now have a blockchain that can facilitate a 3-second transaction peer-to-peer, which is what a lot of these other blockchains are promising, but are still in the vaporware stage. They can promise till the cows come home. Nobody has done what Steemit's done. No one has. There's not a single alternative right now to what Steam has done as a blockchain compared to other blockchains, which is true peer-to-peer networking, meaning I can send you a message right now within 3 seconds. It's better than like anything anybody else can provide, better than banking, better than Swiss banking. If I send, even if, you know, the 100 Steam that I delegated to you, that's a great mechanism on the platform, by the way. That was one of the mechanisms that they got right. But that was me just essentially delegating, which means I still held on to my money, but I gave you the benefit of the inflationary effect of 100 Steam without putting myself in any kind of bad position where you could probably, you know, where like you can't steal it from me. You can use it as long as I give it to you. If I ever want to take it back, I can turn that off and take it back. So that's an incredible amount of control. Just the mechanisms in delegating Steam to other people on a 3-second blockchain is even more immense than what Steam has already done. So Steam has already done something with decentralized identity that no other blockchain can do. You take it a little further out with delegation and moving of money on this platform, and it's even further ahead than some of these other blockchains, like way ahead of them. They don't even come close to being able to offer one simple, basic feature, which is, can I talk to another person on the network? None of them do that. So they aren't doing messaging. They're not doing, all the other blockchains are stuck with the human mind has an infection where it thinks money is a real thing. Money isn't a real thing. Money is a complete abstract invention of our minds that we've given the power to the most evil, duplicitous groups on the planet to control for us. And then we get back into blockchain where we're building things that are the precursor to money. And these muggles, these monkeyed apes, in their infinite wisdom, go around trying to reinvent money with it, which is the most retarded, send you to hell kind of stuff I can think of. So I'm not a very nice person in the blockchain world. I'm really kind of a wrecking ball. I see enough already with Steemit that I can do some amazing things, and I'm not going to wait around for other people to build what they promise to be better when they don't even know what the hell they're doing in the first place. So, you know, at least have, you know, don't look at it as like a social network. Don't look at it as like you're supposed to make money. Look at it as literally the legitimacy behind the Steampunk Radio Network, because the Steam in Steampunk Radio is STEEM, meaning for the blockchain Steam. It's not the Twitter Punk Radio Network. It's not the Facebook Punk Radio Network. It's not the YouTube Punk Radio Network. It's the Steampunk Radio Network. And it's a radio network among other punks that know how to use Steam. If people are not using Steam, then they're not really a punk on the network, are they? It's that it's that simple little mind condition that I'm trying to break in people so that they understand what this is really about, and so they stop recreating the stupid things that we've left behind in the 20th century. See, the 20th century died in 2012 with me, without a doubt. I am so far out of the 20th century that 2012, which was 7 years ago, was the absolute. It should have been over in 2001, but we had a bit of a shock doctrine going on with, you know, buildings falling and terrorists everywhere. So the human mind's been kind of busy with a lot of stuff. And since 2012, these blockchains have been coming on, showing that we don't need to keep falling back into the narration of the group mind control, and we could start creating our own realities and walking in and shaping those realities with the correspondence and cooperation of other people and creators. At least with Steemit, I've got a very nice little simple web address or little address. You're at Lenny Time. You know, the patient zero there is at patient zero. If I wanted to just send them a thank you card, I can do it in 3 seconds. Why would I take the time to log into Facebook, look for them in Facebook, or find them on YouTube, put out the meta that's in a centralized system that doesn't give me any value at all for the meta or the internet traffic? At least here on Steam, even when I'm winking back at you, it's worth a cent or two. At least, you know, at that point, which is nice. So it's basically taking and giving you a free and open internet system, an internet platform where the resources have already been turned into a digital commodity. That's what Steam is. It's the network resources in a digital commodity. If you want to turn that into money, feel free. No one's going to stop you. It can be done. But it's not about the money. It's about a network and its resources on the network, so that you don't get to just willy-nilly decide, hey, I'm going to pay a lot more money so that my story gets put in front of everybody. That's called advertising. And people have been doing it for years and they think it's okay. It's not. It's one of the most evil practices in the universe. Like, don't do advertising. Don't pay for ads. Don't watch ads. Don't participate in ads. It's evil. If you don't believe me, don't have to. at least with Steemit, there's no need for ads. The system itself is paying for itself. Now, if they move to ads, that's going to be an even bigger, shot in the foot, because these kids are off the chart capable of anything stupid. I mean, they've really ruined this network from it being a good workhorse out there. And I'm just upcycling it. I'm recycling it. It's kind of like finding an old car, taking the engine out of it, hooking it up to a horse, and still getting my transportation out of the way, So hope I didn't rail on too much there.
No, we lost the radio about 4 minutes ago, but the concept needed to be discussed, and the radio room here is a great place to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
We can allow anyone else to mic in if they'd like, now that we're no longer on the show.
I'll take questions about this particular topic, because you got me riled up.
Yeah, I've been posting a lot less on Steemit lately because I've been busy. And I've also found a place where I can publish essays called Out of Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the Steemit format doesn't work for essays. Most of the readers don't want to read; they just want to be entertained by memes and short snippets.
Well, and see, and if I can just interrupt for a second, see, that's the nature of where this thing from the last 20, 30 years, social networks came from. Like, the idea is that this is a piece of paper on the internet. It's a virtual piece of paper on the internet. So if you have something of value, putting it on this piece of paper is great. But there's a trick that everybody is making people think that it's like, well, you're supposed to have this viewership. You're supposed to have people that are going to see it, and then that's where it's going to, and that's what they're claiming. But they have nothing built on this network to do that. So it is incumbent upon an author to take their work, and it's just like storing it on a disk. When I write a post on Steemit, it's not because I really care about it going into that feed, because that feed is several 100,000 people that could be seeing that. I don't necessarily want that big audience seeing it, because they're not going to know my stuff. So it's more incumbent upon me to go, make the true peer-to-peer between my readers. Like, I've read your stuff. I've read a lot of your stuff. I read all of your stuff, especially if I vote on it. If you're seeing a vote from me, it means I've gone through I'm pretty stern about that. I don't just upvote something and leave it there. And then I also write the highly resteemed if I'm gonna resteem something. So what we're doing and playing on a small scale, like in the lower numbers and the lower Fibonacci sequences, can expand out to the better ones. But the network itself is not going to give you that mechanism. And then they're going to cheat and make it and let a lot of people down, because people think that that's what it's for. It's like, hey, I'm going to come on here. I'm going to develop a group of followers and everything. But that particular process took me years, Lenny. It took me like over 2 years just to get a few followers. It took me a year to break 100 followers. From 2016 to 2017, I think I got up to like 130 followers. It wasn't until I started doing radio in Austin and then promoting the heck out of just Steem as the only way to get a hold of me. It's like, after a radio show, it's like, hey, if you're going to follow me at steemit.com/@FrankBacon. I didn't give out the Facebook. I didn't give out the Twitter. I didn't give out a YouTube, because I don't own those identities, and they could shut me off at any time they want to. So, like, even with quite frankly, I told him a year ago, like, hey, start using the Steemit thing as a appropriate alternative to Patreon, because then you have this back and forth that's pretty open. And not saying he did or didn't, it doesn't matter. He uses Steemit, but he's got 27,000 followers on YouTube, and those 27,000 followers could all go away tomorrow. Hell, they could go away this afternoon. One well-placed copyright strike or the wrong kind of message in your videos, and suddenly you're crossing the line on some terms and conditions, and guess what? They can turn your channel off. So to work hard to get a 27,000 plus following on YouTube, to me, seems pretty pointless. Like, I wouldn't want to come down to this world of 3D and play these stupid games knowing what I know now. And so I have over 2,400 followers now because of what I did in radio, because of what I've done on YouTube, because of all this other stuff. And I brought these followers on board. Many of them are, probably not using it anymore, but they were my followers. Nobody can take those followers away. Okay? No one. If I write an essay and it says, to hell with, Donald Trump in the US, Donald Trump and anybody in the US is be able to come and pull off my essay. That's the real underlying power behind this, is that it's an immutable recording of something that cannot be functionally blocked or removed from the internet. If somebody wanted to go see it, they go see it. So this is not hidden on the dark web. You don't have to go through these weird connections to get to it. It's there. And that to me is far more powerful and potent, especially in this day and age. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there is a site where we can do that sort of posting, or there isn't yet?
There isn't. I mean, like what you do is you make your post on Steemit, and then what you do with your post becomes the real work. So, for example, talking about it on the show, like the show gives you a perfect, everybody in this room, I'm sure, is all on Steemit in one way or another, has an account on there or has looked at it, has seen it, whatever, so they know how to use it. As a sci-fi writer, if I was just going through the motions of saying, hey, every couple of days or every day, I like to make a little, update to either my book or issue a short story, or it's a bit of fiction in pulp form, whatever, I'm following the mechanism of that. So that's what the posts look like to me. And then they don't get a lot of viewing. They don't get a lot of, upvotes on Steemit, except for the network I've made. In other words, I don't see a big, like if I clickbait it, I don't necessarily see this big jump. I can't really game the system like that. You can game the system because you can actually go out there and kind of figure out by reading the trending page what's interesting to people. And what you'll find out is because of the concentration of wealth, again, in the hands of the few, thanks to the idiots that made this, has really imbalanced that whole mechanism. So you're never going to get a really good result of the organic, hey, I'm going to go on Steam and become a blogger kind of effect. So it's me kind of changing, not breaking the rules, but at least modifying the rules, knowing that the rules are not going to work under the circumstances that they've laid out because they already broke it ahead of time. And again, I'm repurposing that car, taking the engine out, putting a horse on it and using it in a different way. I'm recycling this whole thing. And so from my perspective, look at it from my perspective. My perspective is the entire Steam blockchain is my book. It actually is the whole book. The parts that I've written about it are just these 5,000 or so posts that I've been doing for 3 years. And that's my interaction to it. But I'm a part of a much larger, like, sci-fi novel in my mind, with the interaction of the readers and even the participants of people I'm writing about. So it's good for me in that sense. I think a really, really good way to use it is for like radio networking. Like if quite frankly really wanted to know his audience, don't spend time with them on email, because email is hacked 17 different ways, and email can go away. I'm actually getting ready to give up my email this year. I don't want to use email anymore. It's been around for 20 something years and it's pathetic. It's been around for 30 years actually. I think I got my first email address back in 1994. And so we're coming up on 25 years of email. Hasn't changed much. Everybody can read it. They hack it and they put it out on the web and catch people, diddling babies and do nothing about it. So, this world is really wrecked in my opinion, and there's not a lot you can trust. The nice thing about this blockchain is I've got a really nice, cryptographic key that allows me in and out of my account, that if I keep that, private and secure on my end, I've got better than Swiss level banking at this point. So it was never about the money for me, my friend. It really always was about the technique and the mechanism, the true scientific path, because money is an illusion that is so dangerous. It's worse than advertising. So money is the first evil. Advertising is the second big one. But you could definitely fix a lot of things by just getting the advertising out of your mind. There's no reason somebody should have the ability to stick something in front of your face simply because they paid somebody to do it. That's the most vicious type of psychic attack I can think of. So I'm a bit off the reservation with these things. I hope your guests, or I hope your audience knows that.
They're still here. If they once the show goes off, people bail if it's not entertaining conversation. Hey,
right.
Why